I'd like to be a different side of me, yeah. You'll find a different side of me, like someone pretty neat. A different side.
Thank you for joining us. I am here with my sister, Talisha, and my other sister, Monet, and we are going to be talking about some good stuff. So, as you guys know, that I've recently released a book called Infinitely Worthy. And one of the biggest things in that book has to do with discovering who you are and really stepping in and owning your authentic self. So I invited two people who I know a lot about their authentic self and they know a lot about my authentic self to just talk about what it is to be a woman and discovering those things. So, y'all ready?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So one of the first things I want to talk about is, for me, I didn't just like wake up and one day I was great. I'm still a work in progress. And really, I had a lot of mean years where I took out my frustrations of being unhappy with myself with other people. And one of my main victims is right was my little sister. I was so mean to her. And most of that came from a place of me not really understanding and know who I was. And so I attacked her. So the first question I want to talk about is there or was there a moment where you felt like I finally figured out who I am? Or did it happen gradually?
So for me, it was definitely a gradual thing. I feel like I didn't even start discovering who I was until college, after college. I would say after I graduated undergrad at Rust. That's kind of was like, oh, okay, this is who I am. But now I spent the next couple of years even making that person be more real versus just like a thought. But it was different from undergrad and high school and middle school. Like I don't know who I am. I feel like I didn't have any friends. I felt like I couldn't fit in with anybody. I felt like I was weird. I felt like, man, I knew I was smart, but that was about it. Like I was athletic, but it's just like, who are you? Like when I come home and I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm just going through the motions of day to day to day to day to day, but not really understanding my value and my worth. Like that was just like a thing I didn't even think about until after that. So
was there something that happened that made you start thinking about it? Or was it just like, I'm getting old, now it's time to start thinking about it?
Well, so it just depends on how deep we're talking about. So if you're talking about like with boys, like knowing your worth with boys, or like life, because it kind of happened at the same time. Because growing up, I didn't think I was the prettiest person. And I feel like that part of not feeling pretty also impacted like with boys and my own life, like who I was as a person. And I say that because, so you talk about friends, I felt like when I was in school, middle school, high school, was a lot of pretty girls and I wanted to fit in with them, but I'm like, they're too pretty, they're not going to accept me, so I'm gonna just sit back. That kind of manifested middle school, high school, but it wasn't like I said, start college. I started looking at myself like, okay, I'm getting a little attention, I'm a little pretty, and then that pretty me of seeing myself as pretty allowed me to step out and do different leadership roles that I felt like I always wanted to do, but I didn't. And then that's when I started like, oh, I'm just a natural leader, which is why sometimes I couldn't fit in with the crowd because I didn't want to follow them, not because I was not pretty, So it started becoming an unraveling effect to where it was just one thing after another. It was like, okay, yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you one question and I'm gonna let Monet talk. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question. You said you felt like, oh, I'm getting attention, I'm doing this. Do you think what happened is that you actually changed into a different person, or you just start believing in the person that was already there?
Definitely started believing the person was already there because nothing changed. I didn't do anything drastic. I mean, and I didn't do anything differently. And I was getting attention. And it's like, why? Like, like, okay, that's cool. And I always brag about like, my dad and my brother gave me a lot of insight about guys and stuff. So it's like I always did the bare minimum, but guys are still attracted to me. So I must be cute some kind of way. But no, it just kind of became more of a, I believed in myself. I looked in the mirror, I was like, you are pretty, you are able to lead, you are able to do that. And the more I started saying it, started believing it, it just became more fitting. So when I came home at night, or when I was just to myself, I felt comfortable in who I was, because that's just how I felt.
Okay. Well, now you're up. So the first original question was, how did you feel like you just woke up one day and knew who you were? Was it a process? At what point did you say, hey, I kind of know who I am, or I've discovered who I am?
Well, I definitely did not know who I was as a child. Middle school, teenage, college, none of that. So I think it was really a journey of just really doing the work on myself and really like diving into some of the pain and all that kind of stuff. So I would say I really started to kind of like really like unravel and understand who I was probably like within the last 2 years, and I'm 40.
So
It's
did something happen to make you start that process, or you were like, no, this is something I want to do for me?
Yeah, I think it was a different like devastations throughout my life. And then within the last 2 years, during that when it actually like started to finally open up, like I did a lot of different healing on different things in my life, but there was like one part of me that I never really healed. And so it got to the point where I was faced with this one thing in my life. And that's when I like had to face it. And I had to like, I call this time period is like when I was on God's couch, like he was my counselor. And so that was when I like had to look at this part of my life that I had been not dealing with, not even acknowledging, really kind of like unconscious that it was even really an issue. And so once I did that, I started to like really understand who I am. So part of that, I understood the bad part of me, the ugly part of me, the parts I didn't like about me, and the parts that I didn't want to acknowledge that were good about me. And then that started the journey of like discovery.
So Monet, you have a lot of background in therapeutic services and education and all these things. So if somebody was in the same position, they were reaching their 40s, coming close to it, and was like, I don't know who the hell I am. Like, like, I'm not who I want to be, but I kind of like me. Like, what would you tell them? Like, step one, start here. Like, what would a person even do?
I would say step one would be probably I would ask them, what makes you think you don't know you? Because a lot of times, the things that kind of are like, I call them like little ticks in our personality or how we relate to other people. Those are like clues to like what you really like feel about yourself, if you really know yourself. So really like I would ask them like, why do you not think you know yourself like that? And then that would just kind of like unravel those dark places in our heart that we try to just like ignore.
So guys, is this like a one and done or like a forever process? Like what's the time frame we looking at here?
Forever, I think, for me. I mean, but everybody's gonna be different, but I feel like when you go through different transitions in life, you're gonna learn something new about yourself.
Right.
Like graduate from college, trying to find a job, like getting married, having kids, like even once your kids grow up and you parents to adults, that's a whole nother process. So I feel like you should always be willing to learn more things about yourself. It'll probably be always a lifelong process.
I definitely agree with that. I think that for a long time, and you guys can tell if it happened to you as well, I was hiding behind titles. It was like, I'd meet people, be like, hi, I'm a lawyer. Hi, I'm a mom. Hi, I'm a this. And it was always like behind a title. And the funny thing is, I think I learned this early on because of Keith. So Keith is my brother who's married to Monet. And he was always like super popular and all the teachers liked him. All the people knew him. So like for the first half of my life, I got to get through by just being Keith's little sister. And so I didn't have to do anything to be popular, to have friends and everything. I was just like, oh, that's my brother. And his friends were my friends. And then it wasn't until we moved and like he ain't moved with us. I was like, wait, I'm not Keith's little sister anymore. I have to actually find an identity. But instead of doing the work, I just found new titles. And I just kind of kept finding new titles until one day I had to really face myself and be like, but okay, if you take all those away, if I'm not anybody's mama, if I'm not a lawyer, if I'm not Keith's sister, Keith Senior's daughter, who am I? And at that moment, the answer was like, I don't know. Like, and then after I was divorced, I had to ask myself, like, I don't even really know what I like no more. Because I spent so much time like being accommodating to other people that it was like, do I even like steak? Like, I know we've been going to the steakhouse for 10 years, but I don't even like steak. And that's a simple thing, but that's like a true example. I don't like steak. But Talisha, anything else about just this process of like finding out who you are?
So I feel like one thing that's always stuck with me is that really understanding the value of yourself, like knowing your own self-worth, is what has really kept me grounded, and it's kind of like my fallback point in any situation in my life. It's kind of like whether it's with guys, jobs, work-life balance, it's about you are worthy of greatness. Are you feeding into that greatness, or are you settling for something else?
Yeah.
And I feel like that has been the staple and like my grounding point in all the aspects of my life, like since college. Is like, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but is that the greatest of you? Are you deserving of that? You know, if it's not, we got to cut ties and keep moving and whatever thing. So I think that has really been my thing that I feel like I'm a, even being a mom and like stressing out about baby and like putting everything into baby is like, but you still gotta take care of yourself because you're worthy of some grace too. So
Yes.
Just keeping that in my mind has really been my, my foundation on this continuing growing process.
And you make a good point. And this is the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is, okay, once you've kind of discovered like who you are and okay, this is where I am, I'm working, I'm going to be better version of myself. How do you not lose it again? So lose it in a relationship, lose it in motherhood, lose it in your career. How do you stay in a constant state of learning you, getting better with you, giving yourself more grace and not lose it and have to start over?
So I would say I'm still figuring that out. But one of the questions I like that you asked Felicia earlier about when she was discovering herself, was that she changed or did things around her change? And I was thinking about that because in order for me, like once I realized this is the thing that you need to work on, like this is it, I had to change. Like I had to make some significant changes because the parts of me that was a problem was my ability to like connect and relate with people on a deep, intimate level. And so if I were to continue with that same behavior and that same pattern, I still end up in the same situation. So in order to like not lose yourself, you got to really look at like, what are the things that are keeping me like here? Like, why am I stuck in this same pattern, this cycle? Because like you said, you get a new relationship, you get a new boo, but it's the same you. So you have to make these changes. You got to make like, just figure out what is the change. So you're not like changing because you're not good enough or you're not worthy, but it's just the patterns that you pick up when you go through hurts. It's just the patterns you pick up when you're in difficult situations. So I feel like you have to look at what are the changes that I need to make so I don't get into another relationship where you say, I'm still eating steak and I don't like steak. Like, how did I get to this point where I'm still doing the same thing? Because the cycle will repeat itself if no one breaks that cycle. So.
Right. And I think one of the things that I learned is that I'm naturally assertive and a little bit blunt.
For real?
But once I started dating again, I had to like take it almost to the extreme just so I wouldn't lose me. It's like, hey, these are my no-goes. I'm not 1, 2, and 3. If that don't work for you, you tell me, cool, bye. And I had to be so willing to be like, bye. And one of the things that I had to transition through is that when I first was even considering getting divorced, it was like, I'm gonna be alone. I'm gonna be lonely. Like I had like a built-in +1 for 12 years. And like, I'm gonna be alone. And once I start really enjoying my own company, start dating myself, hanging out with myself, that wasn't an issue. So when someone came along and it just wasn't it, I was like, oh, that was nice. Can you pay for dinner so I could go home already? Because it wasn't like this thirsty, I need somebody. It was like with myself and God, I am completely sufficient. Everything I need is already inside of me. And just someone next to me is a compliment, but not a necessity. So before we wrap up, I want to share one thing. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe I'm going to share my screen if I can figure it out. And this is the dedication for the Infinitely Worthy book. And I'm going to read it to you guys. It says, this book is dedicated to one of my best friends, to a woman who consistently encourages me to strive to be my most authentic self. A woman who has been beside me at my worst and my best, to my beloved sister who is infinitely worthy.
Aww.
So I have a little bit of a confession. This entire session was orchestrated so I could share this dedication with my sister Felicia. And so she, yeah, for real though, during the time when I was separating and questioning lots of my worth, she was like coming out of college, like just like figuring out the world, little happy-go-lucky little girl. But she encouraged me so much just to be myself. And along this journey, she's always talking about, oh, I look up to my sister. She's this, she's that. But I have constantly just envied just her strength in how much she gives. And even as becoming a mom, like she said earlier, is that she has worked to not lose who she is, even while becoming an amazing mom. And I wanted her to know that all of this labor of love of this book, I dedicate it all to you. And I am so grateful for you. I love you. All right, guys. Bye. Everybody, thank you for joining us. I am here with my